April 9th, 1241. Imagine waking up as one of Europe's most feared warriors. By sunset, you'll be dead, along with 8,000 others. This isn't fiction. This is the day medieval warfare died screaming. A single afternoon. That's all it took to erase an entire generation of nobility. Knights who'd trained since childhood, encased in armor worth a village, wielding weapons blessed by priests, gone, not in a heroic last stand. In a slaughter so methodical it resembled industrial butchery. And here's the twist. Their enemy was half their size. How does that even happen? The winter of 1241 brought more than snow to Poland. It brought the Mongol storm. Cities that had stood for centuries became ash. Populations vanished like morning frost under sunlight. Duke Henry the Pious watched from his fortress as refugees flooded in. Their stories identical. An enemy that moved like winter wind, struck like lightning, and showed mercy to absolutely no one. Henry wasn't just any lord. He was Poland's shield, a man whose faith burned hotter than any forge. When he called for warriors to defend Christendom, they came. Templars, Teutonic Knights, the finest Poland could muster. 8,000 men, 60 pounds of steel per knight, lances that could punch through castle walls. On paper, they were unstoppable. On paper, wars are easy. But the Mongols didn't fight on paper. Leading the Mongol force was Baidar, a general who'd spent 20 years dissecting empires from China to Persia. To him, European knights weren't warriors. They were a math problem. And he already knew the solution. Here's what terrified people most. The Mongols had intelligence networks that would shame modern spy agencies. They knew Henry's weaknesses, his tactics, even the feuds between his nobles. They'd studied European warfare like scientists study insects. The Mongols understood something Henry didn't. His greatest strength was also a fatal flaw. Those armored charges that had dominated European battlefields for 3 centuries. Predictable, exploitable, suicidal against an enemy who refused to play by the rules. The armies met near Legnica, on a flat plain dusted with late winter snow. Henry saw perfect charging ground. The Mongols saw a killing floor. Same field. Completely different battles about to happen. Before the main clash, Mongol scouts appeared like winter wolves. They'd ride close, loose arrows with terrifying accuracy, then vanish before any knight could respond. It was psychological warfare refined to perfection. Can you imagine the frustration? You're wrapped in a fortune of armor, trained your entire life for honorable combat, and these enemies treat you like target practice. They're mocking you, and it's working. Duke Mieszko of Opole commanded the vanguard. When he finally snapped and ordered a charge, 2,000 knights thundered forward. The Mongols broke and ran. Victory seemed certain. It was the beginning of the trap. The fleeing Mongols led them on a chase that stretched over a mile. The heavy war horses, bred for explosive charges, not endurance, began to tire. The tight formation unraveled into a desperate race for glory. Then the Mongols stopped running. They split left and right. Behind them stood fresh cavalry. Around them, from concealed positions in the frozen grass, rose thousands of horse archers. The jaws snapped shut. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a massacre executed with cold precision. Arrows fell like winter hail, finding gaps in armor, dropping horses. The scattered knights became isolated targets, their expensive steel transformed into coffins. When survivors staggered back to Henry's main force, they carried a gift. Duke Mieszko's head on a spike. The message was clear and brutal. A quarter of Henry's army had been erased in under an hour. Any rational commander would have held position, forced the enemy to attack fortified lines. But Henry wasn't rational anymore. He was furious. He saw his kinsman's head and made the decision that doomed thousands. He ordered everyone to charge. 6,000 men lowered their lances as one. The earth trembled beneath the thunder of hooves. It must have looked glorious. It must have felt like divine vengeance incarnate. The Mongols feigned panic again. You'd think Henry would have learned. Pride is a powerful drug. The European line stretched thin, chasing ghosts across the winter plain, moving further from support with every stride. Then the world turned black, not from night, but from smoke. The Mongols had prepared the battlefield with chemical-soaked vegetation. When ignited, it created a choking darkness that swallowed armies whole. Inside that smoke, knights became blind men in iron tombs. They couldn't see their banners, couldn't find their comrades, couldn't tell friend from enemy. And through the darkness came voices speaking Polish, calling for rally points. Those voices belonged to Mongol warriors trained in psychological warfare. Knights moved toward the familiar words and died in the darkness, cut down by enemies they never saw. It was a nightmare made tactical reality. While the vanguard suffocated in smoke and confusion, Mongol cavalry hit the exposed flanks. The rear guard, infantry who'd fallen behind the charging knights, were rolled up and annihilated before they understood what was happening. The elite Templars and Teutonic Knights managed to form a defensive circle. These were the best warriors Christendom had ever produced. They stood ready for a glorious final charge. The Mongols simply surrounded them and waited. Then the arrows began. Not a wild storm, but a patient, methodical execution. Each volley claimed lives. The sound that broke them wasn't steel on steel, but the relentless thud of arrows finding their marks. Henry tried to flee with his bodyguard. The Mongols had predicted even this. Fresh riders, held in reserve specifically for this moment, ran him down. The shield of Christendom was pulled from his horse and killed in the mud. When his banner fell, the last resistance collapsed. What followed wasn't battle but harvest. Mongol soldiers moved through the chaos with brutal efficiency, killing dismounted knights who couldn't even stand in their armor. As twilight turned the snow pink with blood, Mongol scribes began their accounting. They filled 9 large sacks with the right ears of the slain. This was their receipt, their proof of victory written in human flesh. News spread across Europe like winter plague. The entire noble class of Silesia was gone. Military orders were shattered. There was no army left. Nothing stood between the Mongols and the heart of Europe. The continent held its breath. But then something impossible happened. The Mongols stopped. With victory complete and the road to Germany open, they turned around and left. Why? The answer came from thousands of miles away. The great Khan Ogedei had died. Mongol law demanded all princes return to elect a new Khan. A succession crisis half a world away saved Europe. Not courage, not tactics, not divine intervention, a funeral. History turned on the death of one man in distant Mongolia. Legnica wasn't just a battle. It was an autopsy of medieval warfare. For 3 centuries, the armored charge had been Europe's answer to everything. That doctrine died in a single winter afternoon, buried in Polish snow. But from catastrophe came evolution. The survivors carried lessons written in blood. Discipline beats courage. Tactics beat honor. Combined arms beat single tactics. Europe began its painful transformation toward modern warfare. The English longbowmen, professional armies. Tactical flexibility. These weren't innovations born from success. They were desperate adaptations learned from total defeat. The seeds of military revolution were planted in frozen fields, soaked with noble blood. 8,000 men entered battle on April 9, 1241. By sunset, they'd become a lesson for the ages. The age of chivalry died, so a new age could be born. Sometimes the greatest teachers are the enemies who destroy you. This is the story they don't teach in school, where glorious charges become suicide, where honor becomes liability, where the civilized West learned warfare from barbarian horsemen. History isn't written by the victors, it's written in the blood of the defeated. If this story left you stunned, you're not alone. Thousands discovered this channel, diving deep into history's most shocking moments. Subscribe to Flow of History, because the past isn't boring. You just haven't heard it told right. Until now.